The billionaire lay motionless on the wide hospital bed, his body surrounded by the sharp scent of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of machines. His fortune, his empire, his towering influence, none of it could stop the truth that every doctor in the room finally admitted: they had no answers left. His body was shutting down, organ by organ, like a mansion where the lights flickered out room by room until only shadows remained. He was a man whose wealth had built skyscrapers, who had his name etched in gold on foundations in universities, but in that cold fluorescent light he was just another human, fragile and trembling on the edge of eternity. The doctors whispered among themselves. Their eyes carried both exhaustion and defeat. They had tried every experimental drug, every modern machine, every last resort they could justify. But nothing worked. His breaths grew shallow, his skin pale, his lips cracked like the parched earth of a forgotten desert. And outside, in the crowded waiting hall, his board members and family argued over inheritance and control, already tasting the empire that would soon be theirs. But in the corner of the waiting area sat someone no one had invited, someone who didn't belong in the glittering world of money and power. She was small, frail, and her skin carried the deep lines of time. Her clothes were simple, her shoes worn. She was a black grandmother, known in her neighborhood for kindness and prayers whispered over the sick when no hospital would see them. Her name was Mabel. To the family, she looked like nothing but an intruder, a poor woman who had wandered into the wrong building. To the billionaire, though, she would soon become something no doctor, no machine, no dollar could ever buy: hope. She had not come because of fame or fortune. She had come because her spirit told her to. Something in the night wind, something in the voice of God within her bones said, "Go to the hospital tonight. Someone's soul is crying out." And so she came, carrying nothing but her faith and the worn Bible she kept pressed against her chest. The nurse at the counter frowned at her. "Ma'am, this is a private ward. You can't be here. Only family." But Mabel didn't move. Her voice was soft, but it carried an unshakable certainty. "Child, I ain't here for the family. I'm here for the one fighting death on that bed. Let me see him." The nurse shook her head, confused, but something in Mabel's eyes unsettled her, not arrogance, not defiance, but a stillness that felt older than the walls of that hospital itself. Finally, with a sigh, the nurse whispered, 5 minutes. That's all. But don't cause trouble." And so Mabel walked into the room where the billionaire lay. The machines beeped weaker now, each sound a countdown. His family barely noticed her enter, they thought she was a cleaning lady. But she walked to the bedside with steps that carried more power than the finest doctors. She placed her trembling hand on his forehead. Her skin was cracked, her palms rough, yet the touch carried warmth like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. The billionaire's eyes, barely able to open, fluttered as if recognizing a presence beyond comprehension. He tried to speak, but no sound came. Mabel whispered, "Hush now, child. You don't need to speak. Just rest. You don't belong to death tonight." The doctors frowned, exchanging looks of irritation. "Who let her in here?" one of them muttered. But before they could move her, something in the air shifted. The monitors steadied. The man's shallow breaths grew stronger, steadier. His chest rose with more force, as if a forgotten strength was returning. The billionaire's family gasped. The doctors rushed forward, eyes wide with disbelief. "This isn't possible," one whispered. But it was happening before their very eyes. A man science had already buried was rising, drawn back by nothing more than a poor black grandmother's touch and a faith that shook the air itself. Mabel leaned closer and whispered words no one could quite hear, prayers soaked in decades of faith and pain. She wasn't healing with her own strength, she was calling on something greater. And for the first time in years, the billionaire felt something money had never given him: peace. If this story already has your heart racing, I want you to pause and tell me one word in the comments: hope. Because sometimes, hope shows up when the world has already given up. And don't forget, subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. The room was frozen. For a long moment, no one dared to breathe, no one dared to speak. The machines beside the bed, which only minutes ago had been screaming their warnings of collapse, now hummed steadily, as if life itself had returned to the dying billionaire. The sharp beeps were no longer a countdown to death, they were a rhythm of survival, an anthem of defiance against despair. The doctors clutched their clipboards, their eyes darting between the monitors and the frail figure of the grandmother. Some rubbed their eyes, convinced they were hallucinating. One of them whispered, almost to himself, this cannot be real. His vitals were finished. His heart was shutting down. We signed his death chart. How is this possible? But the billionaire knew. He could not explain it in words, but his soul recognized something his money had never purchased, the presence of a power greater than all the machines in the world. His lips, dry and cracked, parted slowly. His voice came out in a rasp, fragile but undeniable. "Who are you?" Grandma Mabel leaned closer, her wrinkled hand still resting gently on his forehead. Her eyes, clouded with age yet shining with unwavering faith, softened. "I'm nobody, child. Just a poor black grandmother who's seen too many graves, too many tears. But the Lord told me to come here tonight. He told me someone's soul was crying louder than all the noise of this hospital. That someone was you." The billionaire's throat tightened. No words came at first, only tears that slipped down the sides of his face, tears his family had never seen. For years he had carried himself like steel, unbreakable, untouchable. Yet here he was, trembling under the touch of a woman who had nothing but faith. The family, clustered in the corner of the room, exchanged confused looks. Some were angry, unwilling to believe what they had witnessed. His eldest son muttered, "This is ridiculous. She must have done something. A trick. A drug." His voice trailed off, weak against the undeniable truth. One of the doctors, shaken but honest, shook his head. "No. There was no intervention. We had already given up. Medically, this is impossible. What she did," he stopped, glancing at Grandma Mabel with awe. "What she did defies everything we know." But Grandma Mabel turned to him, her voice steady as stone. "Don't give me credit for what belongs to God. Child, I didn't heal him. Heaven did. I'm just the vessel he used tonight." The billionaire's hand twitched, reaching for hers with trembling fingers. His grip was weak, but his eyes held a desperate intensity. Why me? Why save me?" His voice cracked, carrying not arrogance but a rare vulnerability. Mabel's smile was faint, tired, but laced with warmth. "Because sometimes the richest man in the world needs to learn he's poorer than the poorest soul without faith. You thought money was your fortress. But tonight, child, you learned it crumbles like sand when death comes knocking. The Lord spared you so you could finally see what really matters." The words cut through the air, heavy and undeniable. The family fell silent, the doctors lowered their eyes, and even the buzzing machines seemed to fade into the background. The billionaire closed his eyes, his chest rising with steadier breaths. Memories flickered behind his eyelids, contracts signed in greed, deals made in arrogance, hearts broken by his indifference. He saw the empire he had built brick by brick, not for love or service, but for pride. And for the first time in his life, shame washed over him, heavier than his billions. He whispered, voice trembling, "All my life. I bought everything. But I couldn't buy this. I couldn't buy you." His tears returned, streaming freely now. "I never prayed. Not once. But tonight. I felt something. Something no doctor gave me. Something no money could give." Mabel's hand moved to his chest, just above his heart. "That's because, child, healing don't start with machines. It starts right here. You got another chance, not because of what you own, but because of who owns you." The words shattered the silence. His youngest daughter, who had stood quietly in the corner, stepped forward, her eyes wide with tears. "Dad, she's right. You've given us everything money could buy, but we never felt love from you. Maybe this is your chance to change." The billionaire's eyes opened again, locking onto his daughter's face. Her words pierced him deeper than any scalpel ever could. For years he had ignored her pleas for time, for affection, for his presence. And now, standing between life and death, he realized that all the riches in the world could not buy back the moments he had wasted. His chest shook with sobs he could no longer suppress. The empire builder, the tycoon, the billionaire, broken down by the touch of a grandmother who owned nothing but faith. The doctors, still baffled, began running new tests. Numbers that had once spelled doom now spelled life. His heart was stabilizing. His organs, though weak, were functioning again. "This doesn't make sense," one muttered, staring at the monitor. But it did not need to make sense. It only needed to be believed. And in that room, even the skeptics could no longer deny it, a miracle had unfolded. Mabel finally withdrew her hand, her voice a whisper now, soft yet firm. "Remember, child, this healing ain't yours to waste. Don't go back to your old ways. Use this breath, this gift, to bless others. Or else it'll be taken as quick as it was given." The billionaire nodded, tears soaking the pillow beneath him. "I will. I promise. From tonight, I'll never live the same." As she turned to leave, the family parted quietly, giving way to the old woman in worn shoes. She walked with no pride, no fanfare. Just a small Bible clutched to her chest, her figure fading into the sterile white halls. But to the man who had everything, she had left behind the only treasure that mattered, faith. If you believe miracles are still possible, type one word in the comments, miracle. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this remind us, when the world gives up, faith begins. The hospital's sterile corridors hummed with whispers. News of the impossible had begun to spread, nurses exchanged shocked glances, staff members murmured rumors in the corners, and even strangers in the waiting room leaned forward, sensing that something extraordinary had just taken place behind the heavy door of the billionaire's ward. But inside that room, silence lingered, as though every soul present was still trembling beneath the weight of what they had witnessed. The billionaire lay back against his pillow, his chest rising with steady breaths, no longer the fragile, failing motions of a dying man. His skin had regained color, his eyes, though still weary, now carried a light that had been absent for years. Yet for all his strength returning, his heart was restless. He stared at his family. His children, dressed in wealth, dripping with diamonds and entitlement, stood stiffly near the wall. Their faces betrayed not gratitude, not relief, but unease. They had been preparing themselves for his death, already carving up his empire in whispered conversations. Now, confronted with his survival, their calculations crumbled. His eldest son finally broke the silence. "Father," he said, his voice stiff, rehearsed. "It's a miracle you're alive. But let's not be foolish. We still need answers. What happened here wasn't medical. It wasn't scientific. We should be cautious before claiming." His words faltered as his father's eyes, piercing, newly awakened, locked onto him. "For years," the billionaire rasped, "I taught you all to measure everything in profit. To believe only what could be counted, owned, or sold. And yet tonight, a woman with nothing reminded me of the one thing I lost, my soul." His voice cracked, trembling with the weight of confession. The room froze. His family had never heard him speak this way. For decades he had been the iron fist behind their fortune, the voice that silenced dissent, the man who ruled with contracts and lawyers. And now he sounded broken. His youngest daughter stepped forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dad. I told you. I told you money wasn't enough. You never listened." But now, her voice cracked, her hands trembling, "Now do you see? She saved you, not us. Not the doctors. Her." The eldest son's jaw tightened. "She's just an old woman. Don't let her confuse you. You're alive because your body fought back. Nothing more. We shouldn't," he trailed off, but his tone dripped with disbelief and pride. The billionaire shook his head slowly, his hand lifting with effort to silence him. "No. Don't speak against her. Don't dishonor what you saw with your own eyes. You watched me dying. You heard the doctors give up. And yet here I am, breathing, speaking, alive. Do you dare deny what stood before you? His son looked away, anger and fear battling in his eyes. He could not admit the truth. To do so would mean surrendering the worldview he had clung to all his life, the same worldview his father had taught him. The billionaire turned his gaze toward the empty doorway where Grandma Mabel had left. He whispered, almost to himself, she walked out without asking for a thing. No money. No recognition. She just gave. And I, with all my billions, never gave anyone peace like that. His chest shuddered with guilt. The doctors, still standing near the monitors, exchanged glances. One of them, older and weary, finally spoke. Sir, I've been in medicine for 30 years. I've seen bodies rise and bodies fall. But tonight I saw something I cannot explain. You're right. That woman carried something none of us did. His voice trembled. Faith. The billionaire's eyes closed, and tears escaped down his face. He remembered his childhood, the prayers his mother used to whisper over him before bed, the hymns sung in the small church at the end of his street. He had long abandoned those memories, trading them for ambition and greed. But tonight, as the beeping of the machine steadied, those memories returned like an old song rising from silence. He opened his eyes again, his voice steadier now. I built towers. I built empires. But tonight, I learned I built nothing at all. My wealth can't save me. My power can't heal me. Only faith did that. Faith I abandoned long ago. The family shifted uneasily. They had grown fat on his riches, spoiled by his empire. And now, hearing him speak of humility and faith, fear gripped their hearts. They knew what this meant. If he truly changed, if he chose to live differently, their inheritance, their power, their lives of luxury might crumble. His eldest son finally snapped. So what now, father? You give everything away? You trade your empire for a church pew? You let that poor woman from the street undo everything you built? His words were sharp, laced with bitterness. The billionaire's voice dropped, low and heavy, carrying the weight of both authority and sorrow. If that's what it takes to finally be free, then yes. I would give it all away. Because what good is an empire if the man who built it dies empty? The words struck the family like thunder. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others clenched their fists in anger. But none could deny the truth. They had witnessed a miracle, and the man who had once been their ruthless patriarch was no longer the same. The billionaire leaned back, exhausted, but his eyes shone with new fire. Tomorrow, I will find her. Grandma Mabel. I will not rest until I thank her properly. Not with money, she would never take it, but with something greater. With change. With a life lived differently. He closed his eyes, his breathing calm, his heart steady. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not because of wealth, not because of power, but because a poor black grandmother had shown him the cost of true healing. And as the night deepened, the hospital lights flickered softly, as though even the walls themselves knew a story had begun that no empire could contain. If you're still with me, I want you to comment one word: change. Because sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the healing of the body, it's the healing of the soul. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is only growing deeper. That night, the billionaire could not sleep. The hospital room was quiet, the machines humming softly, but his soul was restless. He had survived what the doctors called certain death. Yet instead of peace, questions stormed inside him. Who was Grandma Mabel, really? Why had she come? How could a frail old woman carry a power greater than all his billions, greater than all the science that had failed him? He stared at the ceiling, tears rolling silently down the sides of his face. For decades, he had believed he was untouchable. He bought cures, bribed politicians, bent laws. And yet, when death came closest, none of those things mattered. His empire had stood powerless. Only she, a woman who owned nothing, had stood strong. By morning, his determination was set like stone. He would find her. When his eldest son entered the room, Carrying a stack of legal papers, the billionaire's voice startled him. Cancel the meetings. Cancel everything. I want to find her. His son frowned. Who? The woman. The one who touched me. The one who prayed. His voice cracked, but his eyes burned with resolve. The son scoffed. Father, you don't mean that. She's a nobody. A stranger. We can find her, sure, but why? You owe her nothing. The billionaire's voice cut through the air. I owe her my life. The son's face hardened. You owe this family your empire. Don't let her confuse you. You were always practical, father. Don't trade wisdom for superstition. But the billionaire shook his head. Practicality nearly killed me. Faith saved me. And I will not ignore that. The argument grew sharper. His daughters tried to calm the storm, but tension poisoned the air. For the first time, the billionaire stood against the greed he himself had planted in his children's hearts. Later that afternoon, he demanded the nurses tell him where Grandma Mabel had gone. But no one knew. She had left the hospital quietly, fading into the city like a shadow. No records, no address. Just whispers that she lived somewhere in the poorer side of town. And so, the billionaire ordered his driver, take me there. The doctors protested, insisting he was still too weak, but his resolve was unshakable. Draped in a hospital gown, with N4 still taped to his hand, he insisted on being wheeled out. Either I go to her, or I rot in this bed with unanswered questions, he growled. The car rolled through streets his wealth had rarely touched. Gone were the polished skyscrapers and neon lights. Instead, narrow alleys and cracked sidewalks lined with weary faces passed by. Children played with broken toys, mothers carried heavy baskets, old men sat on stoops staring into nothing. This was the world he had forgotten, the world where Mabel lived. The driver finally stopped in front of a small, crumbling brick house with peeling paint and a crooked door. They say she lives here, he murmured. The billionaire's chest tightened. For a moment, he hesitated. How could a man who owned skyscrapers knock on the door of such a humble place? But humility pushed him forward. He stepped out, leaning heavily on a cane, and approached the door. When he knocked, it opened slowly. And there she was. Grandma Mabel. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she did not bow, did not gasp at his presence. She simply said, "Child, you came." The billionaire's throat tightened. He could not stop the tears. I had to, he whispered. I couldn't let you just walk out of my life. You gave me back my breath. You gave me back my soul. But Mabel shook her head gently. I didn't give you nothing, child. That was never mine to give. That was God's gift. I just delivered it. He stepped inside her small home. The walls were lined with photographs of children and grandchildren, some gone, some still living. A wooden cross hung above the table, its edges worn from years of being touched in prayer. The air smelled faintly of herbs and bread. The billionaire looked around, stunned. You live here? In this place? Mabel chuckled softly. Yes, child. 4 walls and a roof. That's all I need. What good is a mansion if the people inside it ain't got peace? Her words pierced him like arrows. He lowered his head, ashamed. I built towers and empires, but my heart was empty. You live here with so little, yet you have more than I ever did. Mabel's smile was gentle, almost motherly. Because joy ain't in riches. It's in giving, in loving, in trusting. You chased the world, but you lost yourself. Last night, God gave you another chance. Don't waste it. The billionaire dropped into a chair, his body shaking. For the first time in his life, he felt small, not because of weakness, but because of truth. Then tell me, Grandma, he begged, voice breaking. What do I do now? She leaned forward, her old hands clasping his. Start by giving back what you stole. Heal the people you hurt. Build not for yourself, but for others. That's how you honor the miracle." Her words struck him with undeniable clarity. He realized then that his survival was not just for him. It was a calling. A chance to rebuild his empire not as a monument to his pride, but as a beacon of hope. The billionaire wept openly, his head in his hands, as Mabel prayed softly over him. And in that tiny house on the edge of the city, the richest man in the world finally learned the meaning of true wealth. If you believe true wealth isn't money but peace, type one word in the comments, peace. And subscribe, because the journey of this billionaire is only just beginning. The billionaire returned to his hospital suite that evening with a fire burning inside him. His body was still weak, but his spirit was alive in a way it hadn't been for decades. For the first time since building his empire, he was not thinking about profit margins, quarterly reports, or stock prices. He was thinking about people, faces he had once stepped over, names he had once dismissed, souls he had once ignored. And at the center of all those thoughts was Grandma Mabel's voice: "Start by giving back what you stole. Heal the people you hurt. Build not for yourself, but for others." The next morning, against the protests of his doctors, he demanded a press conference. His assistants panicked. His lawyers pleaded with him. His children argued furiously. But he silenced them all with words they had never heard from his lips. "Enough. I have lived as a king of stone. Now I will live as a servant of flesh. Call the press." By afternoon, the largest conference room of the hospital was overflowing with cameras, reporters, and flashing lights. The world had already heard whispers: "The billionaire who was supposed to die has lived," but no one knew the details. When he entered, pale but standing tall, the crowd gasped. He had been written off as gone. Yet here he was, alive, his eyes sharper than ever. He stepped to the podium, placed both hands on its edges, and spoke in a voice raw but unshakable. "Yesterday, science gave up on me. Money gave up on me. Even my own family gave up on me. But one woman did not. She came with nothing but faith. She touched me, she prayed, and death fled. Today, I stand here because of her." The room erupted in whispers. Reporters glanced at each other in disbelief. Was this the same man who once mocked religion, who once said in an interview that faith is for the poor who can't afford medicine? Now he stood confessing the opposite. He raised his hand to silence the murmurs. "I will not let this miracle be wasted. From this day forward, my fortune is no longer mine. I will use it to heal, to build, to restore. Not towers for my name, but homes for the forgotten. Not banks for greed, but shelters for the broken. Because what good is an empire if the builder dies empty?" Gasps filled the room. Some reporters furiously scribbled notes, others shook their heads, unable to believe what they were hearing. But the cameras captured every word. And within hours, his confession spread like wildfire across the world. Headlines screamed: "Billionaire claims faith healed him. From fortune to faith, miracle sparks new mission. Doctors confounded as dying tycoon survives." The world was divided. Some mocked him, calling it senility, calling it desperation. Others wept at the testimony, finding in his words a hope they had long buried. But behind the scenes, the storm was far darker. His eldest son stormed into his room that night, slamming the door behind him. "What have you done?" he demanded. "You made us look like fools. The stock is plummeting. Investors are terrified. Do you realize what this means for our empire?" The billionaire's gaze was steady. "Yes. It means nothing." His son's face turned red. "Nothing? This is everything we built. Our family's name, our legacy." The billionaire shook his head slowly. "No. We built a prison. A cage of gold. And last night, I was freed. I will not go back." The son's voice trembled with rage. "You're going to throw it all away? For what? For some old woman's prayer?" His father's reply was calm but fierce. "For truth. For peace. For something money cannot buy." If you cannot see that, then you are still the prisoner I was. The words stung. His son stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. But his youngest daughter slipped quietly inside. Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "Dad. I believe you. I saw it happen. I'll stand with you, no matter what." For the first time, the billionaire smiled. It was faint, weary, but real. "Then maybe," he whispered, "this miracle wasn't just for me. Maybe it was for us all." The days that followed were chaos. News crews camped outside the hospital. Religious leaders spoke his name from pulpits. Skeptics tore his reputation apart on television. But through it all, one truth could not be silenced: the man who had everything was now giving it away. And though the world debated, though the markets panicked, though his family divided, one thing was clear: the miracle was only the beginning. If you believe true change shakes not just one life but the whole world, type one word in the comments: believe. And don't forget to subscribe, because the journey of this billionaire is far from over. The billionaire's confession shook the world like an earthquake, but the aftershocks were not kind. By the end of the week, stock tickers bled red. Investors panicked, executives abandoned ship, and newspapers labeled him the mad tycoon. Television anchors sneered at his speeches, dissecting them with cynical laughter. But the fiercest opposition came not from strangers, it came from his own blood. At the long oak table in his penthouse boardroom, his children sat in silence, their faces carved in stone. The billionaire, thinner now, leaned on a cane as he entered. The city lights glowed behind him, skyscrapers he had once owned piercing the night sky. For decades, this table had been the altar of power where his word was law. But tonight, his family's eyes burned with rebellion. His eldest son spoke first, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Father, you've lost your mind. Publicly humiliating us. Throwing away billions. Investors are pulling out in droves. You're destroying everything we built." The billionaire's voice was low but steady. "No. I'm destroying what destroyed me." His second son slammed a fist against the table. "You taught us to win. To crush competition, to own everything. And now you want us to give it away? For what? For some miracle from a street woman?" The billionaire's cane struck the floor, silencing them. His eyes, tired but burning with fire, swept across their faces. "Yes. For a miracle. For truth. For peace. You saw it with your own eyes. You watched death flee. And still you deny?" But denial was easier than surrender. Their hearts, fed on greed since childhood, could not loosen their grip. His eldest daughter finally spoke, her voice trembling. "If you do this, Father, you'll leave us nothing. Do you expect us to live in poverty after you spoiled us with riches?" The billionaire's reply was heavy with sorrow. "I expect you to live. Truly live. Not as slaves to greed, but as free souls. If you can't, then you've already chosen chains heavier than mine ever were." Silence fell, thick as smoke. But it was broken by his youngest daughter, her voice clear and defiant. "I'll stand with him." Her siblings turned on her like wolves. "You're blinded by emotion," one spat. "You'll regret this when you're begging on the streets." But she did not flinch. "I'd rather beg with peace than feast with emptiness." Her father's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, he felt hope for the legacy he might leave, not of steel and stone, but of faith. Still, the battles outside the boardroom grew harsher. Lawsuits flooded in. Business partners severed ties. Headlines mocked him daily. From fortune to folly. The billionaire who lost his mind. Faith won't save your stocks. Even the government circled like vultures, questioning his sudden philanthropy, probing for scandal. But through it all, he held fast to Mabel's words: "Heal the people you hurt. Build not for yourself, but for others." He began selling off properties, not to hoard the profits, but to funnel them into hospitals, schools, and shelters. Reporters followed him, jeering at his every move, but the poor welcomed him with tears. For the first time in his life, he walked through streets without bodyguards, shaking hands not with politicians but with beggars, sitting at tables not of marble but of wood. And each night, when exhaustion weighed on him, he returned to the memory of that frail hand on his forehead, that voice that had pulled him back from the brink. He whispered to himself, "Don't waste the miracle." But the price was steep. His empire crumbled faster than anyone expected. Skyscrapers were sold, companies dismantled. His name vanished from the Forbes list, replaced by men who had once bowed before him. And his children, except the youngest, turned their backs completely. Yet the billionaire did not waver. One evening, as he walked into a newly built shelter funded by his fortune, he saw rows of children sleeping on clean beds, their bellies full for the first time in weeks. Tears blurred his vision. He turned to his daughter and whispered, This is richer than gold." But storms still loomed. The world was not done mocking him. His family was not done fighting him. And deep down, he knew the test was not over. The miracle had saved his life. Now it demanded his soul. If you're still following this journey, I want you to comment one word: faithful. Because staying faithful in the storm is harder than finding faith in the miracle. And don't forget to subscribe, because the greatest test is yet to come. The world's eyes remained fixed on him. Every step he took, every donation he made, every word he spoke was dissected on television screens and gossip columns. To some, he was a hero reborn. To others, he was a fool throwing away a kingdom. But beneath the spotlight, the real war was not fought in the streets or in the press. It was fought in the quiet chambers of his own family. One night, he gathered his children once more at the oak table in his penthouse. His cane tapped the floor as he entered, his body weaker but his spirit unbroken. His youngest daughter stood faithfully at his side. The others sat stiff, their eyes cold. "I've made my choice," the billionaire began, his voice slow but firm. "This empire will not die with me. But it will not continue as it has. From today, half of it will be liquidated. Hospitals will be built. Schools will rise. Homes for the poor will be established. The rest will be used to rebuild, not for power, but for service." Gasps echoed across the table. His eldest son slammed his fist down. "You can't do this. You'll ruin us." The billionaire's gaze cut like steel. "I've already ruined myself once, with greed. I won't do it again." But as he spoke, something flickered in his son's eyes, a shadow of calculation, cold and dangerous. Days later, betrayal arrived. It came quietly, in the form of lawyers, contracts, and board members whispering in smoke-filled rooms. His children, except the youngest, banded together. They declared him unfit, mentally unstable. They moved to seize control of the empire, citing concerns for the future. The billionaire was blindsided. He sat in a courtroom, frail under the harsh lights, as his own flesh and blood painted him as a senile old man led astray by superstition. "Your Honor," his eldest son's lawyer declared, "our father has suffered a breakdown. He speaks of miracles and faith healing, abandoning rational thought. He has given away billions recklessly. He is no longer fit to manage his estate." The billionaire's heart ached deeper than any illness had ever cut him. His own children, his heirs, stood against him, not for love, not for justice, but for greed. When it was his turn to speak, he rose slowly, leaning on his cane. His voice trembled but did not break. "Yes. I speak of miracles. Because I lived one. I should be dead, but I am alive. And if that makes me mad, then let the world call me mad. But I would rather be mad with truth than sane with lies." Gasps rippled through the court. Reporters scribbled furiously. His words were replayed across television networks within hours. But the betrayal cut deep. The court stripped him of certain powers, handing control of key assets to his children. His empire slipped further from his hands, not by collapse but by theft. That night, he sat alone in his penthouse, staring at the city lights. His youngest daughter came to him, tears in her eyes. "Dad, don't let them break you. They can take your company, but they can't take your soul. He nodded slowly, his face lined with sorrow. I know, child. But it still hurts. To raise them, to give them everything, and see them choose greed over truth. His voice cracked, and for the first time since his healing, he wept not for himself, but for them. In the quiet, his mind returned to Mabel's voice, don't waste the miracle. Heal the people you hurt. He realized then that this betrayal was part of the test. Would he lash out? Would he fight with the weapons of greed he once knew so well? Or would he remain faithful, even when stripped bare? He wiped his tears and whispered, no. I will not go back. They can take the empire. They can mock me. But they cannot steal what God gave me. The following day, instead of retreating, he doubled down. He sold more of his personal holdings, pouring them into projects that fed the hungry and housed the homeless. The world gasped at his defiance. His enemies sneered. But the poor began to bless his name. And though the betrayal still ached, the billionaire found strength in knowing this truth. His children could inherit his money, but they could not inherit his miracle. If you believe betrayal cannot break a soul rooted in truth, type one word in the comments, strength. And don't forget to subscribe, because the final chapter of this story will reveal the legacy that even death could not silence. The weeks passed, and the world continued to watch. The billionaire was no longer the iron-fisted ruler of an empire. His wealth had been scattered, his businesses dismantled, his name mocked by skeptics. Yet in the alleys and shelters, in the hospitals and schools he had begun to build, his name was whispered with gratitude. But his body, once revived, was still fragile. The doctors reminded him daily that the miracle which spared him had not made him immortal. Age and weakness would still have their way. He accepted it with peace. I wasn't healed to live forever, he told his daughter one night. I was healed to live right. Despite his frailty, he insisted on visiting the projects he had funded. Leaning on his cane, he walked through orphanages where children hugged his legs, through clinics where mothers wept at the sight of free medicine, through soup kitchens where men whispered blessings over their bowls. For the first time in his life, he saw his money feeding not pride, but people. And yet, one more thing remained unfinished. One evening, he returned to the little brick house on the poor side of town. Grandma Mabel was sitting on her porch, her Bible on her lap, her eyes weary but bright. She looked up as he approached, and a smile creased her face. You came back, she said softly. He lowered himself into the chair beside her, his cane clattering against the wood. I had to. I couldn't leave this world without saying thank you. She tilted her head, amused. Thank me? Child, I told you before, it wasn't me. It was him. He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I know. But you were his hands. His voice. Without you, I wouldn't have lived long enough to see the second chance. And I wasted so many years, Mabel. I built towers but left people starving in their shadows. I chased wealth but left my family broken. I thought I was king, but I was a slave. His voice cracked. You freed me. Her hand, wrinkled and trembling, rested gently on his. No, child. You freed yourself the moment you believed. The Lord just used me to remind you. Don't carry regret. Carry gratitude. He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. I don't know how much time I have left. My children, most of them hate me now. My empire is gone. But if I can leave one thing behind, just one thing, it's this, that faith is worth more than gold. Mabel's eyes shone with tears. Then you've already left it. Not in speeches, not in riches, but in the lives you've touched. That's the legacy that outlives death. In the months that followed, his health declined. He spent his last days not in a mansion but in a modest home, surrounded not by lawyers and executives, but by the poor who had once been invisible to him. His youngest daughter never left his side. And on the final night, when his breaths grew shallow again, she leaned close and whispered, Dad, don't be afraid. He smiled faintly, his hand trembling as it reached for hers. I'm not. Death doesn't scare me anymore. Not after I saw life return once. Not after I met her. His eyes flicked to the Bible resting on the nightstand, a gift from Mabel. His lips formed his last words, "Tell the world, don't waste the miracle." And then, as gently as a candle being blown out, his soul slipped away. His funeral was unlike any other. The rich did not fill the hall. Instead, the poor came in crowds, the hungry he had fed, the sick he had healed, the homeless he had sheltered. They wept not for the tycoon he once was, but for the man he became. Grandma Mabel sat quietly in the front row, her hands folded, her face calm. When asked how she felt, she simply said, "He learned the truth. That's all that matters." And in the years that followed, his story spread like a legend. Not of a billionaire who owned the world, but of a man who lost everything yet found peace in the touch of a poor black grandmother. His children, even the ones who betrayed him, could not silence that story. The shelters stood, the hospitals thrived, and the world remembered not his empire, but his miracle. If this story moved you, I want you to comment one word: miracle. Because miracles don't always come to those who expect them, they come to those who need them most. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this remind us, when the world gives up, faith begins.